Hello and welcome. My name is Tsobotsi Lehloenya, and I'm a third-year mechatronic engineering student with a strong interest in medical technology. Thank you for joining me for this virtual industry tour titled Inside South Africa's Biomedical Device Lifecycle. This is more than just a technical walkthrough. It's a look into how engineering, public health, regulation, and local innovation intersect to address real medical challenges. Together we'll explore South Africa's medtech ecosystem, the people, the processes, and the institutions that take a device from an idea on paper to a tool in the hands of a nurse or surgeon. Our case study, the Sinapi chest drain, developed and manufactured in Stellenbosch, will serve as a real example of how this entire life cycle plays out in South Africa. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge Sejal Rabakusin, my industry guide and mentor on this project. Her insights have been invaluable in helping me understand the practical realities of this field. To guide our time together, I've broken this presentation into 5 main sections. Industry overview. We'll map out the landscape, the stakeholders, regulatory bodies, manufacturers, and support organizations that make the biomedical device sector work. The biomedical device lifecycle will follow a device's journey from early stage need identification to post-market surveillance. The role of engineers. Engineers are involved in every part of this journey, not just design. We'll look at their impact in quality assurance, manufacturing, and regulatory affairs. The case study of the Sinapi chest drain, a South African success story that connects all these elements and shows that local innovation can go global. Lastly, we'll look at a reflection and opportunities. We'll wrap up with a critical look at where South Africa is excelling and where there's room to grow, especially in engineering education, regulation, and industry partnerships. Whether you're an engineer, a policymaker, or simply curious about medical technology, this tour is designed to be accessible and informative. I'll explain technical terms and use examples wherever possible. Let's begin with a fundamental question. Why do biomedical devices matter? And especially why in South Africa? In any health system, medical devices are the backbone of care. They diagnose illness, monitor recovery, support surgery, and enable rehabilitation. Think about blood pressure monitors, infusion pumps, ventilators, or orthopedic implants. These tools are critical in saving lives and improving health outcomes. But here in South Africa, access to these devices is not equal. Many rural hospitals and public clinics struggle to obtain or maintain reliable equipment. Why? Because we depend heavily on imports. Many devices used here are designed for high-resource settings, places with stable electricity, cold chain storage, and advanced training. Those same devices often don't work as intended in our context. During COVID-19, these weaknesses became glaring. With ports closed and air freight delayed, hospitals couldn't get essential tools like ventilators or PPE. But something important happened. Local manufacturers stepped up. The South African medical device industry capitalized on this disruption. Sinapi Biomedical, the Southern Group, and many other companies produced locally, supporting hospitals and keeping the system running when international supply chains failed. That moment showed us what's possible. It proved that local device innovation is not just about national pride, it's about resilience. When we innovate locally, we lower costs by avoiding import tariffs and freight, design for our realities like load shedding or limited staffing, provide better support with local service technicians and parts, and empower our healthcare workers by involving them in the design process. This is not just an economic issue, it's a public health imperative. South Africa's biomedical device industry is supported by a wide network of stakeholders. Let's unpack who they are and what they do, with real-world examples. Regulatory bodies. SAHPRA and SABS. The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAHPRA, classifies medical devices into Class A through D. It also handles establishment licensing, clinical trial oversight, and audits manufacturers against ISO 13485. The South African Bureau of Standards, SABS, contributes through standards, testing, and certification services for safety and packaging compliance. Research and innovation enablers. Bodies like MEDIC, the South African Medical Research Council, the SAMRC, and the Technology Innovation Agency, the TIA, provide critical funding and incubation support. Universities are also foundational to this space. The University of Cape Town is known for its division of biomedical engineering. The Central University of Technology houses the MedAd Center, which focuses on additive manufacturing for implants. Northwest University runs a Center for Digital Health that integrates diagnostics, telemedicine, and health data. Stellenbosch University is a pivotal stakeholder in South Africa's biomedical device industry. Through its state-of-the-art BMRI, specialized research in African health challenges, validation of devices like the Sinapi test strain, and training of skilled professionals. Its multidisciplinary approach, industry partnerships, and commitment to technology transfer position it as a leader in advancing biomedical innovation, with a focus on locally relevant, globally competitive solutions. These universities often collaborate with hospitals and startups to co-develop prototypes and conduct real-world testing. Manufacturers and startups. Local OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, such as Sinapi Biomedical, Cape Ray, and Medical Diagnostic, manufacture devices locally and export internationally. Startups like LifeCube, Biocode, and Envisionit Deep AI lead in wearables, diagnostics, and machine learning tools for healthcare. Testing and quality providers. These include consultants and quality auditors like SGS, DQS, and the MBAC. However, a major limitation is that South Africa lacks ISO 17025 accredited testing labs, forcing many companies to conduct biocompatibility and electrical safety tests overseas. Clinical users and procurers. Hospitals such as Groote Schuur and Tygerberg give feedback on device usability. Medical aid schemes like Discovery Health influence which devices are funded and reimbursed. Doctors contribute during early testing phases and assist in clinical adoption. Field service and maintenance providers. Companies like MedHold, MedSci, and SA Biomedical Services provide installation, training, and servicing, especially important for remote and undersourced hospitals. Consultants and regulatory partners. Regulatory experts and consultancy firms like MBAC, SPR Consultec, and Operon Strategists help startups prepare technical files, manage submissions, and maintain compliance across both SAPRA and CE requirements. Every one of these actors play a role in getting a device from concept to clinic. It's this ecosystem, not any one player, that determines the success of medtech innovation. These groups work best when they work together. And here's where engineers come in. We often serve as the connectors. We collaborate with all these groups to turn a problem into a safe, functional, and scalable product. Let's now talk about something many startups overlook: quality management and global readiness. South Africa is not just a domestic market. Our companies are building for Africa and the world. But you can't sell into Europe, the US, or even neighboring countries without proving your device is safe and effective. This is where ISO 13485 comes in. It's an international standard for quality management systems, QMS, for medical devices. It covers everything from design controls to traceability to complaint handling. Without ISO 13485, you can't get a CE mark for the EU, you can't apply for FDA 510K for the US, and you cannot participate in MDSAP, the Medical Device Single Audit Program, recognized in countries like Japan, Canada, and Australia. Think of ISO 13485 as a passport to global markets. The benefits don't stop there. A well-run QMS builds investor confidence, reduces manufacturing errors, speeds up regulatory review, and improves the chance of being picked up by global NGOs like MSF or UNICEF. Let's go back to Sinapi Biomedical. They started by aligning to ISO 13485, which helped them earn both SAPRA approval and the CE mark. This dual certification gave them access to public hospitals in South Africa and export markets across Europe and Africa. Their lesson? Quality systems are not just a cost. They are a competitive advantage. Now that we've explored the broader ecosystem, let's focus on the journey a biomedical device takes from idea to implementation. This journey is structured into 6 core phases: needs identification and concept development, design and development, verification and validation, manufacturing and process development, regulatory submission and approval, market launch and post-market surveillance. At each of these stages, engineers, clinicians, regulators, and manufacturers work together. And each phase is governed by strict international standards, most notably ISO 13485, which outlines how quality should be managed throughout the life cycle, and ISO 14971, which focuses specifically on risk management in medical devices. In South Africa, SAHPRA is involved in regulating every step, ensuring not only that devices are safe, but that companies maintain ethical and traceable practices. It's important to note, while the life cycle looks linear on a diagram, real-world development is iterative. You may move back and forth between phases. For example, feedback from clinical testing may trigger a redesign, or manufacturing constraints may affect a prototype's final form. Let's take this journey step by step, beginning where all good medical devices begin, with the real problem in a real clinical setting. Every successful biomedical device starts with a clear user need, and in South Africa, those needs are often identified on the front lines of care. Think of overworked trauma surgeons in rural hospitals or nurses managing neonatal care with limited equipment. These are people who see the gaps. Let's take an example. Imagine a doctor reports that the current chest drainage system they're using in a public hospital is bulky, prone to leakage, and not sterile. That's not just a complaint, that's an innovation opportunity. At this early stage, engineers collaborate with clinicians to frame the problem statement, understand the clinical environment. For example, is it an urban trauma unit or a rural clinic? And they also conduct feasibility assessments, technical, economic, and regulatory. We ask questions like, can the device be built with materials available locally? Will it function in low-resource settings? Is it easy to be used by nurses with minimal training? And will it meet procurement and reimbursement requirements? This phase includes tools like harm scoring matrices to prioritize the urgency and impact of the solution, preliminary risk registers to identify foreseeable hazards early, and concept briefs, summarizing the intended purpose and use. Critically, this is where ethics enters the conversation. Devices that will impact children, disabled persons, or be deployed in underserved communities must be assessed with sensitivity. This is also where co-creation starts, when engineers sit down with doctors, patients, and even maintenance staff to define what success actually looks like. Once the concept is deemed viable, we move into the technical heart of the process, design and development. Here, we translate the needs into tangible designs. That includes CAD models for structural components, simulations of performance under clinical conditions, material selection for biocompatibility, sterility, and affordability, and pre-DV planning for usability testing to ensure the device works for its intended user, not just on paper. Engineers now apply principles of human-centered design by asking, can the user understand this device instantly? And frugal innovation, where appropriate, focusing on removing unnecessary cost and complexity while maintaining safety and function. In some cases, higher-end solutions may be more suitable. For example, a hospital might opt for stainless steel instruments that are more affordable but require replacement after a few years due to wear and cleaning processes, whereas titanium instruments, while more expensive, may last significantly longer but might not fit within certain budgets. Innovation in South Africa must be effective across diverse healthcare environments. Whether it is for premium or cost-sensitive markets, devices are expected to perform in power-unstable regions, overstretched public clinics, and facilities with constrained maintenance budgets. Prototyping is also central in this phase, and it's never one and done. We go through multiple iterations. First mock-ups made of cardboard or foam, then 3D printed models, later pilot units made with near-final materials and components. Each round is tested, critiqued, and refined based on supplier or production service provider feedback, clinician feedback, service engineer input, and regulatory feasibility. This is where the device comes to life, and where clinical and engineering languages must align. Before a device can be mass-produced or submitted for regulatory approval, it must pass rigorous testing. This brings us to the verification and validation phase, often abbreviated as V&V. Let's clarify these terms. Verification asks, did we build the device according to the design specs? For example, if the valve is supposed to open at 80 millimeters mercury, does it actually open at 80 millimeters mercury? Validation asks, does the device work as intended in the real world? Does it solve the problem in its intended use environment? Verification involves bench testing in simulated environments, mechanical stress analysis, tolerance checks for components, and electrical safety testing. Validation includes clinical trials or observational studies, usability assessments with real clinicians, and field testing in hospitals. These tests are not optional. They are part of your risk management file, your design history file, and your regulatory submission package. All validation involving humans require Ethics Review Board or ERB approval. For high-risk devices, this can be extensive. South Africa has relatively few ISO-accredited tested labs, which means many developers send devices abroad for things like biocompatibility, sterility validation, and electromagnetic compatibility. This increases costs and timelines, which is why some companies like Sanapi invested early in solid documentation and internal test rigs. Ultimately, no device can move forward without V&V. It's the proof that your idea is safe, effective, and ready for the real world. Once a device passes V&V, the next challenge is to make it at scale consistently and cost-effectively. Manufacturing is not just about replication. It's about repeatable quality. Key focus areas here include tooling, process validation, and quality assurance systems, or QAS. Tooling is creating the equipment needed to assemble or mold the device. This might include CNC machines, injection molding tools, or jigs. Process validation, ensuring each step in production yields consistent results. For example, are adhesive joints curing properly across batches? Quality assurance systems, setting up standard operating procedures, SOPs, batch records, and inspection checklists. This ensures incoming materials are inspected and traceable. In South Africa, manufacturing challenges include limited ISO-certified packaging partners, dependence on imported materials, and shortages in specialized assembly skills. But companies find creative workarounds, such as using manual assembly lines to reduce capital costs, training operators directly from nearby communities, and establishing pilot runs. These are small batches between 100 and 500 units for final process tuning. Sanapi, for instance, used a manual packaging process that still met ISO 11607 sterility standards by proving integrity through testing rather than automation. This phase is where your design becomes a product, reliably, safely, and affordably. With a validated design and a functioning manufacturing process, it's time for regulatory approval. In South Africa, that means submitting your device to SAHPRA, our national regulatory body. For Class B to D devices, moderate to high risk, SAHPRA requires full design documentation, evidence of V&V, a certified quality management system, clinical evaluation reports, and instructions for use and labeling. The regulatory file must show that the risks are known and controlled, that benefits outweigh potential harms, and that your team can consistently produce safe devices. But most South African developers do not just stop there. If they want to export, they also need SE marking for Europe, FDA 510K or de novo clearance for the US, or entry into MD-SAP countries. Each has its own rules, but aligning to ISO 13485 helps because it creates a common foundation. Many companies use a strategy called dual alignment by preparing documents in a way that meets both SAHPRA and international needs. This saves time, reduces duplication, and makes global scaling more realistic. It's a long process. SE approval can take 12 to 18 months for small companies, but aligning early, even in the concept phase, can shave off years of rework. At last, the device is ready for market. But this is not the end of the life cycle. In fact, it's the start of a new responsibility: post-market surveillance. Under both SAHPRA and ISO 13485, companies must now monitor field performance, collect complaints and feedback, track expiry dates and usage patterns, and be ready to issue recalls if needed. Engineers are involved here too, analyzing failure trends, revising designs, and updating risk files. Smart companies are using digital tools, QR codes on packaging to log feedback, serial numbers for traceability, and cloud-based systems to flag issues in real time. Why is this important? Because no matter how strong your design is, real-world conditions are unpredictable. Use environments vary. Users make mistakes. Packaging gets damaged in transport. What matters is how companies respond. Post-market data becomes input for the next generation of devices. In this way, the lifecycle truly is a loop, with feedback driving continuous improvement and trust. When people hear the term biomedical engineer, many imagine someone building a robotic limb or designing an artificial heart. And while that's part of the picture, the truth is that engineers play a much wider set of roles throughout the medical device lifecycle. Let's visit the lifecycle we just explored and walk through how engineers contribute at each phase. Needs identification and concept development. At the very beginning, engineers work closely with doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals to explore pain points, areas where technology could reduce risk, save time, or improve outcomes. We help translate qualitative feedback like, "This machine is too bulky," into structured technical needs. We also conduct early feasibility studies. Is the concept safe? Can it be built affordably? What might go wrong? Engineers often create initial risk registers, cost estimates, and mock-ups to test assumptions. Design and development. Here, engineers dive into CAD modeling, simulations, material selection, and usability features. We evaluate, is this material biocompatible? Will the device survive transport over rough terrain? Can it be operated in dim lighting or with gloves on? Importantly, we work in design teams, often including software developers, clinicians, and industrial designers. Design doesn't happen in isolation. It's a dialogue between people who understand health and the people who understand mechanics, electronics, and systems. Verification and validation. Engineers run all kinds of tests: mechanical load testing, pressure tests, stress simulations, electrical fault analysis, and battery life benchmarking. We also design the test rigs themselves, devices used to test devices. In this phase, we also update the risk management file as required by ISO 14971. This is a document that traces all identified hazards and how they've been mitigated. Manufacturing and scale up. Industrial and mechanical engineers work on tooling, quality control protocols, and standard operating procedures, SOPs. We validate that the same product can be made again and again, safely, that the raw materials meet tolerance requirements, that staff are trained and systems are traceable. This is where consistency becomes safety. Regulatory engineering. A fast-growing career path is the regulatory engineer. These professionals compile technical files for SUPRA or CE submissions, clinical evaluation summaries, labeling, and instruction for use, IFUs. They ensure compliance with ISO 13485, SUPRA's essentials principles, and even complex EU MDR documentation. Post-market roles. After a device is launched, engineers help track performance. We analyze complaint logs and recall data. We revise designs to fix issues or improve safety. And we help prepare updated risk-benefit assessments for recertification. All of these steps feed back into the product, closing the lifecycle loop. So from the first brainstorming session to the final recall tracking dashboard, engineers are there. We are the bridges between technical possibility and clinical reality. And increasingly, engineering roles are expanding into new directions. Let's now look at where biomedical engineers in South Africa actually work, and the educational paths that get them there. Engineers in practice. Engineers work across multiple sectors, wearing many hats. In startups like Sanapi, engineers may move between CAD design, supporting independent clinical investigations with technical expertise, and implementing QMS processes, ensuring that the device is safe, manufacturable, and compliant. In hospitals and servicing firms like MedHold, where engineers manage equipment uptime, calibrate machines, and train clinical staff. In consulting firms such as SPR, Consultec, or MBAC, where engineers help other companies navigate ISO certification, CE applications, or FDA pathways. With regulators like SAPRA, where engineers inspect factories, review clinical submissions, and assess conformity to essential principles. In academic institutions, where engineers lead research, prototype devices, or teach the next generation. What backgrounds do these engineers have? Depending on the device, engineers may come from diverse disciplines: biomedical or mechanical for structure, fluid dynamics, and usability; electrical or electronic for sensors, battery systems, and embedded devices; software or mechatronics for app integration, AI-powered tools, or IoT health systems; industrial or systems for workflow design, QMS architecture, and traceability systems; civil for designing and constructing hospital facilities with medical equipment needs in mind, ensuring spaces accommodate device installation, safety, and workflow; documentation-oriented fields for document control and regulatory process design. In fact, one of the strongest traits of this field is its interdisciplinary nature. You don't just work with other engineers. You work with nurses, procurement officers, ethicists, maintenance staff, and policymakers. Biomedical engineering is one of the few fields where technical design decisions directly affect patient lives, and that demands a collaborative mindset. Let's look at how South Africa is developing the next generation of medtech engineers, and where the gaps still exist. Leading training institutions. There are several excellent university programs: UCT Biomedical Engineering Division with strengths in design and clinical validation, CU2 MedAd Center focusing on additive manufacturing and surgical tools, NWU Digital Health Center developing mobile diagnostics and telemedicine solutions. These programs teach design for frugal innovation, device lifecycle mapping, regulatory science, and risk documentation. But challenges remain. Here are some of the training gaps. Firstly, lack of clinical exposure. Most engineering students never set foot in an operating theatre or trauma ward. They don't see how devices are actually used or misused. Secondly, limited regulatory training. Risk management, FMEA, and QMS documentation are often missing from core engineering degrees. And thirdly, weak links between academia and industry. Many students graduate having never worked with real QMS software, regulatory consultants, or manufacturing partners. To fix this, universities are starting to embed students directly into startups or hospital QA teams. For example, students placed at Cape Ray worked on real breast imaging prototypes. Interns at Medical Diagnostic got to shadow ISO audits. And CUT students helped develop production workflows for 3D implanted guides. These bridges between disciplines are essential. The more our engineers understand clinical realities, regulatory expectations, and manufacturing constraints, the more likely their innovations are to succeed. Let's zoom out for a moment. Why do engineers matter so much in South Africa's medtech sector? Because we sit at the intersection of clinical need, technical design, health economics, quality systems, and regulatory navigation. We speak the language of scalability, safety, and systems thinking, and that's exactly what South Africa needs. As we roll out national health insurance, the demand for cost-effective, locally manufactured, and easily serviceable devices will only increase. And none of that is possible without engineers who can design for load shedding, build in post-market tracking, align to CE and SAPRA requirements, and train staff on usage and maintenance. Engineers are not just builders. We are enablers of access, safety, and sustainability. To succeed, we need to be clinically literate, regulatory fluent, and quality obsessed. And we need to see ourselves not only in labs and factories, but in procurement boards, standard bodies, and innovation hubs. That's how we build a medtech sector that is resilient, inclusive, and globally competitive. Let us now bring all the life cycle stages we've discussed to life through a real-world example. This is the Sinapi chest drain, a proudly South African medical device that exemplifies frugal innovation, cross-sector collaboration, and global competitiveness. What is a chest drain? It is a device used to remove air, blood, or fluid from the chest cavity, often after trauma, surgery, or infection. In emergency situations like a stab wound or collapsed lung, chest drains mean the difference between survival and suffocation. But the traditional systems used in South Africa's public hospitals, typically open bottle drains, are prone to contamination, difficult to sterilize, unsafe for both patients and healthcare workers during transport, and often reused, leading to even greater risks. Sanapi's response was a game changer. Their engineers designed a closed-system, single-use chest drain that is sterile out of the package, lightweight and portable, safe to use in rural or mobile trauma settings, and significantly more affordable than imported alternatives. It's not just a product, it's a systems solution, designed with the local healthcare environment in mind. And as we'll now explore, Sanapi's success didn't come from having more money or access. It came from using the full device lifecycle and building partnerships from day one. Sanapi's story begins the way many great medical innovations do, with clinical frustration. Doctors in trauma wards at public hospitals like Tygerberg were using open bottle systems that leaked during transport, exposed staff to infectious fluids, and were difficult to clean and reuse safely. They voiced their lacked stable electricity. Many users weren't fluent in English, and high staff turnover meant constant retraining. So they took a frugal innovation approach, which involved using locally available materials to reduce supply delays, avoiding unnecessary electronics like batteries and sensors, designing intuitive interfaces like click-fit connectors and one-way valves, and embedding usability into the packaging itself. Their team built multiple prototypes, bench-tested them, took them to clinics, got feedback, and repeated the cycle. This iterative co-design, grounded in real-world usage, is what made the device successful. It wasn't about adding features, it was about removing obstacles, technical, logical, and human. Concerns and Sanapi engineers listened. Together with trauma surgeons and biomedical engineers, they developed a clear design brief. Closed system, low cost, portable and durable, and minimal training required. They also faced harsh realities. Some rural hospitals. After refining their design, Sanapi entered the critical phase of verification and validation. Verification involved bench testing for flow rate, leak resistance, and pressure control, drop and transport testing to stimulate rural ambulance usage, sterility and packaging integrity assessments, and evaluating shelf life in fluctuating storage temperatures. Validation involved clinical studies at Tygerberg and Groote hospitals, ethics committee approvals and usability evaluations, and feedback from nurses who highlighted training and interpretation challenges. One major insight: in emergency rooms, instructions aren't often read. So Sanapi developed pictographic instructions for use, visual guides printed on the box. These don't require English proficiency and can be understood in seconds. Manufacturing. Sanapi set up production locally in Stellenbosch. Key features of their manufacturing strategy included manual assembly lines to keep capital costs low, simplified tooling, so no large automated machines, and sourcing from regional suppliers wherever possible. They validated their process under ISO 13485 for quality management systems and ISO 11607 for sterile packaging. But their biggest challenge was packaging. Finding partners who could meet sterility standards at a price point suitable for local production was tough. They solved this by bringing some of the packaging process in-house and validating it themselves through testing. This shows that regulatory compliance is not about having deep pockets. It's about understanding requirements and building quality into the process. With V&V complete, Sanapi tackled regulatory approval, starting with SAPRA. Their chest drain was classified as a Class B device, which requires full technical documentation, clinical data, risk management files, and a certified QMS. They received SAPRA approval, but didn't stop there. They understood that for real growth, especially into public tenders and NGO contracts, they needed international recognition. So they pursued and achieved the CE mark for Europe. CE marking is no small feat. It involves engagement with a notified body, a third-party reviewer in the EU. You need clinical evaluation reports, essential principle alignment, and document post-market surveillance plans. Sanapi streamlined this process by building their SAPRA and CE documents in parallel, using the same ISO 13485 foundation. This is a dual pathway strategy, efficient, credible, and attractive to global buyers. Post-market surveillance. Sanapi also implemented a smart system for tracking real-world usage. Each chest drain box includes a QR code. Users can scan and submit complaints, suggestions, or incidents reports. This data is reviewed regularly and feeds back into risk management and design updates. To date, they've had no major recalls, and where minor issues arose, they were resolved with design tweaks, not legal action. This kind of proactive monitoring, especially in low-resource settings, is rare, but it's what keeps patients safe and opens doors to future approvals. Now let's talk about why Sanapi pursued CE marking so early and how it shaped their growth. In South Africa, even with SAPRA approval, public procurement is slow and fragmented. CE marking allowed Sanapi to bid on European tenders, qualify for NGO procurement, including Medicines Sans Frontières, MSF, and UN agencies. It also allowed them to export to regional partners in Botswana, Namibia, Kenya, and beyond. But perhaps most importantly, CE compliance de-risked the product for buyers. Many global donors and hospital groups worry that African-made devices aren't up to standard. Having the CE mark changed that perception. Now, Sanapi's device is used in over 20 public hospitals in South Africa. It's exported to multiple countries and part of procurement conversations with major global actors. And it all stems from their early alignment to user needs, ISO standards, scalable manufacturing, and smart regulatory navigation. So what can we learn from Sanapi? They prove that 1. South Africa can produce world-class, affordable, safe medical devices. 2. A strong quality management system aligned early is the backbone of scalability. 3. Clinical co-design, working with users from day one, leads to better, safer devices. 4. That frugal engineering does not mean cutting corners. It means smart trade-offs for context-specific value. Their journey also shows the power of partnerships, engineers and clinicians, startups and universities, local regulators and global standards. And finally, Sanapi shows that local does not mean limited. With the right systems, the right mindset, and the right team, a small company in Stellenbosch can build a device that saves lives across the continent. As we reflect on Sanapi's journey, it's important to be honest about the broader challenges still facing South Africa's medtech sector. These are structural, not individual, and they affect startups, researchers, and engineers across the country. Let's explore 6 key barriers. 1. Lack of ISO-certified testing labs. South Africa does not have enough ISO 17025 accredited facilities for medical device testing. This means that local developers must send their devices abroad, often to Europe, for biocompatibility tests, sterility validation, and electrical safety and EMC testing. The result? Weeks of delay, costs in foreign currency, and barriers to small companies who can't afford that burden. This is one of the biggest single obstacles to local device development. 2. SAPRA bottlenecks. SAPRA has made progress in regulating medical devices, but it's still a small agency stretched thin. Unlike Big Pharma, where review systems are well established, medical device applications often face long wait times for classification, unclear timelines for feedback, and delays in establishment licensing. Small startups without dedicated regulatory staff can easily get stuck, not due to poor quality, but because the process isn't yet streamlined. 3. Fragmentation between stakeholders. Innovation doesn't happen in silos, but South Africa's medtech ecosystem is often fragmented. Universities may develop prototypes that never leave the lab. Startups may struggle to access clinical partners, and hospitals may not know how to engage with early-stage innovators. What we need are innovation hubs that bring together design, testing, manufacturing, and clinical validation under one roof. Groups like MEDIC are starting to do this, but the model needs to expand. 4. Inconsistent procurement practices. Even after getting SUPRA approval, a device might not be adopted, especially in the public sector. Procurement varies from province to province. There are few central lists of approved devices, and local developers often struggle to get listed in tenders, even when their devices are cheaper and safer than imports. This is a policy problem. If we want to support local innovation, we need procurement systems that reward it. 5. Limited engineer training in clinical and regulatory domains. We've discussed this already, but it bears repeating. Many engineers leave university without exposure to hospitals and clinical workflows, knowledge of ISO 13485 or risk documentation, and experience with design for manufacturing. This makes the learning curve in startups or regulatory bodies steep and slows progress. 6. Weak post-market surveillance. Post-market surveillance isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's how we ensure ongoing safety and respond to field conditions. Yet many companies don't collect complaint data consistently, lack systems for logging field failures, and don't know how to act on post-market data. This weakens trust in local innovation and limits access to international markets that demand robust post-launch monitoring. Despite these challenges, South Africa's medtech sector is at a turning point. There are major opportunities for growth if we align our systems and strategies. Let me walk you through 7 key opportunities. Firstly, NHI as a market catalyst. National health insurance will radically expand access to healthcare, and that includes medical devices. Demand will grow for affordable, serviceable, local solutions. Procurement will favor scalable manufacturing and rapid maintenance. Engineers who align to NHI early will help shape the future device landscape. 2. Master plans support localization. South Africa's medical devices master plan is part of a national effort to grow local manufacturing. It aligns industrial policy with skills development, regulatory infrastructure, and procurement reform. If implemented effectively, this could be a game changer for local producers. 3. Innovation hubs are expanding. Centers like MEDIC, supported by the CSIR, are helping startups with QMS implementation, ISO audits, regulatory submissions, and market access planning. These hubs bridge the gap between a university prototype and a market-ready product. We need more, in more provinces and linked directly to hospitals. 4. Innovation that serves all stakeholders. Designing high-value solutions for real-world healthcare challenges means balancing the needs of every stakeholder in the system, from clinicians and patients to funders, NGOs, and health ministries. In South Africa, innovation is often shaped by resource constraints, but it also aims to meet the standards and expectations of high-performance healthcare systems. For example, clinicians need devices that are reliable, usable, and safe. NGOs and public health systems require scalable, cost-conscious tools that can be deployed widely. Donors and investors look for proven impact and sustainable value. Patients benefit from devices that are accessible without compromising quality. This is why South Africa is well placed to lead, with examples like Sinapi, Cape Ray, and Medical Diagnostic showing how locally developed devices can be frugally engineered when necessary, high-tech when required, and always responsive to the broader healthcare ecosystem. 5. QMS as a strategic asset. ISO 13485 is more than just a compliance tool. It's a credibility signal. Companies with certified QMS attract better investment, get faster reviews at SUPRA, qualify for export earlier, and earn trust in clinical environments. Startups that invest in QMS early will have a competitive edge. 6. Expanding export markets. We are already seeing South African companies entering EU markets via CE marking, regional markets in Africa, and NGO pipelines for crisis response and maternal care. Sinapi's reach is not an outlier, it is a blueprint. Finally, 7. Dual certification de-risks procurement. Devices that are licensed by SAPRA and CE marked face fewer procurement barriers, inspire more confidence among public hospitals, and are more attractive to venture capital and global donors. Dual certification is fast becoming a best practice and a strategic differentiator. Let me close with 3 reflections drawn from this tour of the biomedical device lifecycle in South Africa. First, a successful medtech ecosystem starts with a problem. A patient struggling to breathe, a nurse trying to manage infection risk, a rural hospital without reliable equipment. Every device begins as a response to that problem. And when we support each phase of the life cycle, from concept to post-market, we build not just devices, but solutions that save lives. Second, engineers are not on the sidelines. We are central. We connect user needs to technical designs, local constraints to global standards, and innovation to systems of quality, safety, and usability. Without engineers who understand both design and regulation, devices stall. Without engineers embedded in procurement teams, we waste money. And without engineers in public policy, we miss the chance to build resilient systems. Third, the Sinapi chest strain shows us what's possible. A small company in Stellenbosch, working with clinicians and engineers, has created a world-class device that is safer, that is more affordable, that is now exported to multiple countries. This is not an exception. It is proof of concept for what South Africa can do, with the right alignment, support, and strategic vision. If we can invest in our engineers, reform our regulatory systems, and create spaces where innovation and public health meet, we can build a medtech future that's not only local, but global. Thank you.